Hello, folks. Some of you may know me. It's nice to be back. It's almost for me. It's coming back in time a little bit. For those who do know me, I used to be an ADI. Oh God, now nearly 5-6 years ago, and I left the ADI industry to continue coaching. Believe it or not, I'm now a small business coach based here in Leicestershire. But fortunately, my job has taken me different places all over the world. And I still actually, believe it or not, coach two particular driving schools who remain nameless for the time being. And they're growing even despite what's currently going on, and they're taking good money and they're very, very profitable. I've gone on to write 5 different books now, which is fantastic. Book number 6 will come out at some point this year, which is superb. And we are just launching a small business only online magazine and news website, which will go live in the next 2 weeks, just for practical advice and information for small business owners. If anything that I've seen over the last 8 weeks is that the media en masse have decided that all small businesses should be lumped in with every single business in this country. Well, I'm sure you'll appreciate that actually small businesses are very, very different to big companies that are currently under pressure. So we've decided to go in that direction, continue coaching, continue doing masterminds and things like that, which there'll be a little bit more about later. But I am here to help small businesses actually get the business that their hard work deserves. So that is pretty much me, and I'm quite excited by joining you today. So thank you for the invite, Carly.
No problem. Apparently, people can't see you, so is there not an option on yours to have video on, or?
I'm sure there is. Oh, hang on. I can't see it if it is. Okay. I can see you.
Well, that's okay. Well, we're going to go through to the slides now, so we're going to focus on those. So, but I'm sure if you Google Marc, you'll see his lovely face on all of his presentations as well, and his Insta on Insta. So Marc's been invited today. We're both experienced marketeers and business people. Marc has a background as an ADI and helping small businesses as a small business coach. My background previous to DIA and somewhat what I do for DIA anyway is as a professional marketeer. I've worked as a marketing director from everything from a international private banking group to the doctors and dentists medical indemnifier and legal defense body, through to a further education college, charities. I've done a whole range of marketing of businesses big and small. And also I do still do a bit of corporate advisory, so advising businesses on how to build, how to deal with change, how to deal with crisis and risk and all those kind of things. So today is not just going to deal with things like how do I get my pupils back or how do I grow my business once I restart. It's also going to look at some of the baseline things that you need to sort out in your business right now and before you go out there, and be cognizant of when you are back at work as well. Because the one thing that COVID-19 has done is very much opened our eyes to the fact that risk can come into us in our businesses and impact us from any direction at any time. And it can be the completely unknown that completely wipes us off our feet as a business. So whilst, coronavirus is this kind of unseen little virus bumping about that we're also frightened of for our health, it's also been something that's quite frightening for business as well. So it's a time when a risk like this really impacts you to think about how you're going to risk proof this business as much as you can in the future as well. So that's in a nutshell what we'll go through. But if I just tab onto the next slide here. Today, we're going to look at how to make your business fit for the road again and ready for what will be, wish I could tell you it wasn't, but we've got to deal with facts here, a very, very challenging environment for business post-lockdown. So what we're going to cover in this session is stabilizing your finances, so counting the cost, having an assessment of where you are right now and where you're going to have to get to build back up to a normal level of income to sustain you, yourself and your family and your business. But then how are you going to build on that for growth to try and get back on that growth trajectory that you were hoping to get on this year? We're going to go back to basics, why it is important to have a business plan. If you have one, why it's important to revisit that and look at where it needs to be amended to fit the situation you're going to go into now. And if you haven't got a business plan, why it's important you should have a business plan at all, and more important than ever. We're going to look at the 4 Ps. We'll explain what those are if you're not familiar with them. They are a part of marketing, about how, where and when and what are you selling and to whom. But the biggest P there I'm going to concentrate today, and Mark is also going to talk to you about, is pricing. Because in this environment, we're going to go back to what you charge, and how you charge is going to have to change to some degree. And then we're going to talk a little bit about contingency planning to manage future risks. There's the managing the risks that you have right now that we're going to do large in this session. And then there's and here's the fact that you need to think about risk and how it impacts your business, and what are those risks, and how are you going to manage them in your business at all times, so you properly plan for these things not to impact you as much as they have done through COVID-19. And you're probably sitting there thinking, well, nobody could have foreseen this, so how could I have planned for it? There are things that some businesses have been able to do that they've always had in place in terms of contingency planning, that have helped them ride out this storm in a much better position than those who had no contingency planning in their business at all. So let's quickly start off with some bits and pieces on stabilizing your finances. Every business at this moment in time will have had its foundations, its financial foundations, severely impacted. Not being able to trade, or trade in the same way, kind of not having the income, not having any ability to see when that income can restart, has been extremely frustrating and stressful time for ADIs, for small businesses across the piece. So the first thing that we recommend people do now is assess how deeply your business has affected. Now, you may know this already. You may be able to say, I know it's been badly affected. I don't need to do a calculation. But actually sitting there with the finances, if you haven't done that already, and working out what really will be your gap between this year's income and last, is going to really help you decide how and where you need to get to once you go back to work, and what you can do now to help shore up your finances. So our recommendation is to start with the hard numbers. If you haven't updated your financial statements, such as profit and loss or cash flow statements, or your budgeting or your accounts in any way, it's time to sit down and do those numbers. And what will really help is to compare now. I know it's going to sound like it's going to depress you rather than help you, but to sit down now and compare where you are right now, your year on year, with where you are last year, is going to show you the real gap and the shortfall where you've been and where you need to get to, and it'll help you see where your losses have mainly been. Is there anything you want to say on that bit, Mark?
Yeah. I was just looking at the chats. People are having a few problems with sound and vision by the looks of it.
I'll go back to those whilst you have a little bit of chat.
Yeah. Do you know what? Yeah. Every single small business has been affected. There's a lot of stuff going on in the media that some businesses have been affected a lot more than the others. And if people are embarrassed by their finances, please don't be. Quite simply because there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of small businesses that are probably in exactly the same boat as you right now. If nothing else, this COVID thing is probably going to teach a lot of people to come out of the back end of it probably a damn sight wiser. And I'm sorry if I'm a little bit harsh on that fact, but it's very, very true. And I'll give you a really good example of this. So when you're looking at stabilizing your finances and something that you're looking for in the future, is that when the government announced their package for small businesses and entrepreneurs, one of the biggest things that suddenly appeared all over social media were a lot of small business owners complaining that the money wasn't in the bank today, i.e. they've had to wait until the middle of May, or they've got to wait until the end of May, beginning of June for it. Here's the thing. I started then having a discussion with someone, and I stopped that discussion after 5 moments, quite simply because it was like talking to a wall. But I need you to consider this going forward. Are any of you likely to be sick? Yes. You're all driving instructors. Are any of you likely to be in a car accident? Well, you run a higher risk. Are any of you likely to have a disease such as cancer? Potentially, yes, 1 in 3 of us. Are any of you likely to die? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. Here's the thing, those things are more likely to affect you than this current situation. But I can guarantee you that the amount of small businesses without money in the bank to get them through has been frightening. The government, in all fairness, have gone over and above what should have been expected from any small business owner. Any big business owner, to be fair, but any small business owner, the responsibility of your finances is yours. The money, the profit that you make pays your mortgage, pays your rent, pays your food, pays all your bills, your home bills. So one of the biggest tips coming out of this and being wiser is have at least 3 months worth of money in the bank to keep you going. Because all of a sudden your outlook changes. If you get rear-ended by a lorry on one of your driving lessons or a driving test and you are unable to work for 4 to 6 weeks, how are you going to get through? This current situation has just highlighted little things like that, that when you're looking at your finances, that this needs to be a part of your plan coming out of the back end. What's gone is gone. What's done is done. But coming out of the back end of this, we need to be coming out a damn sight more wiser about our finances. Back to you, Carly.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. One of the, if you haven't done that to point, listen, I recognise, particularly with startups and new businesses, it is difficult to put money aside because you're in the zone of investing in the business, or if you've been through hardship in your business for another reason other than COVID-19, again, it's hard to put that money aside. But when we talk about pricing later on and what you should be charging, it's getting back to that point of, if you're not charging enough and your business isn't generating enough income for you to be able to put at least something away for that rainy day within your business, then that is a real problem. And this is where the risks are really going to bite those individuals who aren't doing that. So, okay, you might not have been able to manage that in the past and difficult trading environments and all of that, but we're now dealing with known risks, as in we know something can come along that is beyond our control. And that could actually be not just something like an epidemic. It could be our own health issues, individual health issues. It could be having to give up work to be a carer. It could be a reputational issue where somebody on the web, and we've had this recently as a member issue, is determined to bring you down and turns all your customers against you, and you can't rebuild your reputation quick enough to fill your diary, so you decide to not trade. So it's thinking of it, this sobering us all up to the need to better plan, to have that stronger financial foundation and have some contingency. But to know where you need to get to, you also do need to do that comparison of this year's and last year's year to date, and just know exactly how much your losses have been, to understand what you're going to have to make up the rest of the year to get to even just a basic level of income. So we won't lay that point too much, because I think the message is there, and I think people have realised themselves that they may have been caught short in the financial side of things at this time. So the sad news is, and I wish this was a good news webinar where I could tell you lots of nice things, but I think being frank and honest is my style. I am an optimist, but I don't believe in you kind of sitting there and saying, oh, the world's a terrible place, and I'll try and do my best to lobby DFT, the Chancellor, and DVSA to get you these things. I believe in a reality to help you realise what will happen and what won't happen. So the other thing to think about is, not only are you going to be looking to re-establish a level of income, and that's going to be a hard fight this year because you've had less time to generate the same amount of income and you're in an uphill mode, you're also going to have some rising costs within your business, which also might be, the whole issue might be compounded by the fact that you're also maybe only going to be able to teach a certain amount of pupils each week. Because if you follow safe training protocols, there is a lot of advice out there that you need to limit your exposure to pupils. So that could mean shortening lessons and having less pupils in your day. So the number of pupils equals the number of income goes down, but also you might have to have more costs in your business such as PPE. So sit down, and even if it's a fag packet calculation, and let's look at the costs, the rising costs, the new costs such as PPE, and having to provide that for a long time now. It may be 6 months to a year, and some may decide that they're going to have these protocols in place which have a cost attached to them, such as wearing PPE in every lesson, as per the norm, to manage infection and contagion in your job, whatever that may be. So it's where you can factor in the costs, where you can lower costs to plug income gaps and offset other rising costs. It's time to think now where you can consolidate your finances. A lot of you would have already done that because of the fact that you weren't working. A lot of you will have taken the advice to do things like look at your finances as a whole, move to cheaper rates in terms of credit cards and things like that, look, switching providers. We did all of that in previous seminars, but we need to look at the business costs now, and look at whether even lending is something that will help you consolidate your finances. For example, we've spoken in other webinars about the business bounce back loans. There are some driving schools who are looking to use those to put them on a more firm financial footing as they go back to work, because they see that as being an important thing to do. And they're going to use those loans and take the fact they don't have to repay them for 12 months to try and, make sure they can go out there on a stable financial footing, do the best that they can do throughout this next 12 months, and be in a position to be able to make those repayments when they start in year one at the end of the 12 months. So so that's the bit about stabilizing your finances, is take that time to sit down now and look at where you need to get to and what's going to be an impediment in that. What are your rising costs? Are you going to have to do less lessons? How are you going to manage that in terms of income? And we'll be doing that in a moment when we talk at pricing and how to look at increasing your pricing as well. Okay, so, and just point there, Steve. Yeah, I've just seen your note. PPE, yes, it might not be a rising cost for you in terms of your pupils' PPE, because you might require your pupils to bring that and supply it yourselves, but you're going to have your own PPE costs, and that's not a cost that you had in your business before, and every single penny is going to count in your business going forward. So make sure you sit there and you go, okay, if I'm going to have PPE in place for the next 6 months only for me, what is that cost over the next 6 months? What is the monthly cost? And am I factoring that in to my monthly income projections and cost projections and my annual cost and income projections? So I know where I'm spending money and what I need to do to get in the money to cover all of that. Okay. I did hear yesterday of a member who rang me and said they're going to charge their pupils for any masks and stuff if they don't turn up as well. So it's kind of, it's your own discretion what you do about the pupils' PPE, whether you carry it to protect yourself and you just give it to them, whether you insist they turn up with it, and if they don't turn up with it, you don't have anything for them and the lesson can't go ahead. That is all up to your discretion. But these little costs can soon add up for your business. Okay. So we talked about the additional costs in the previous slide, really. The fact that you may have shorter lessons, because, as I said, a lot of training protocols are saying shorter lessons, less pupils per day. So that would cause a drop in income for most people. Cost of PPE we talked about. To get back your customer base, if you've lost it within this period, or to make sure that you can get to new customer bases, because the customer base for ADIs might actually change as a result of this crisis, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. You might need to invest in more marketing than you've ever done before. You might need to think about marketing and advertising being a cost that you have to factor into your budget moving forward. Is marketing going to become more necessary because we're going to enter a recessionary environment post-COVID? And will there be less pupils able to afford driving lessons? Will there be less demand, but there's more competition? There's more people out there chasing fewer pupils. So these kind of things have to be factored in. What are you going to do to put you in front of the right pupils who are going to be able to afford to pay? And we'll talk about the different types of customer at the moment and how that might change for you. We might see, although you can drive around now and see that the cost of fuel is very, very low, we might see, once the world is deemed to have gone back to work in some degree, that the prices start to creep up again, because those businesses have got to recoup their losses somehow. So, we might see rising costs of the basic things that you need to deliver your role. There's already talk about the fact that car manufacturers are going to have to charge on average £1,500 more for new vehicles than they did before, because they've got that kind of shortfall in their finances they've got to recoup as well. So keep an eye on anything that's talking about costs rising or forecasting that costs will rise, because that's going to impact your business and your finances over the next year. So anything you want to say on that, Mark?
Yeah, when I switch my mic on, there you go. Yeah, actually, there are a couple of points. So Carly sort of like mentioned a bit about forecasting. Look, let's just make it really simple for people, right? Just look at your best case scenario, which effectively means that business returns back to normal, which is all lovely. Your worst case scenario, and somewhere in between, so that you've actually got some real idea on your money. Carly's already touched on it. I'm not going to pull any punches. We are headed for one of the biggest recessions this country has ever seen. So I know that the driving instructor bubble has been pretty good over the last few years. And I remember when I joined the ADI industry, I actually joined during what was the biggest recession we had ever seen back in 2008, 2009. Well, guess what? This one's going to be bigger. So you have to be very honest with yourself and as a business as a whole, looking at your finances. Okay, it's not a tick box exercise. You've got to be honest. You have to be hugely honest. Carly's also touched on the lending at the moment. Look, there are people out there that are a little bit scared of it. Don't be. It's 0% for the first 12 months, and then the rate is roughly 2.5% for the next couple of years paying back. If you can get hold of that money, do so, because you are never, ever likely to get rates like that again. But bear in mind, if you are taking this loan out, it is a loan. It does need to be repaid. On the flip side of it, if you look at it as a potential to get a return on investment, it's a really smart move. So yes, it can shore up your finances, but if there are elements of your business that need tending to, i.e. you may not have a website yet, believe it or not, some people don't. You may not be doing marketing consistently. Everything might look old and tired. That would be the time to actually update it, get it done, and put it in place for when work starts coming back in. So there's been some really, really good points, and especially when it comes down to costs as well, guys. Going back to my days as an ADI, and I know it still does happen, is, there was at one point, I believe I was paying £1.40 for a litre of diesel going back some years. And I was possibly one of the only instructors brave enough to put up my price by £1. And the thing that's really struck me is the amount of instructors that didn't put their prices up. And again, you have to be honest with yourself in the fact that your bills will increase. Every single person on this call has probably got council tax. I guarantee you your council tax has gone up. I guarantee that all your living expenses have gone up. So I know we'll be talking about pricing later, but again, you need to be really honest with yourself regarding your finances, looking at your current pricing, your current model. Is it sustainable? Can you absorb these costs, or are you going to have to pass them on to continue trading? Again, there has to be that honest conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Pat's just mentioned that on the business bounce back loans, and banks are struggling to process the applications. So it is an idea, and I think we've been advising from day one, get your applications in early, because it could be a long-winded process as demand creeps up for these loans as well. But certainly they can be used for paying yourself an income. They can be used for things like consolidating finances within your business, so i.e. shifting expensive credit cards and loans to a lower rate. And also they can be used for things like buying assets into your business. So new things that you need to help you either market, get on the road. It could be that you want to, knowing what you've been through in this crisis, set up an e-learning platform to help, give virtual lessons to your pupils. There's many reasons you can use these to build your business back up and think about how your business can be better in the future. Okay, so we're going to look at really at having a business plan, because you're going to have to sit there as well as look at your finances. And once you've done that exercise and realized where do you need to get to in terms of a level of income to recover, it's how are you going to get there? It's the roadmap. So every business has to have a business plan. If you didn't have one before, you do need one now, because having a business plan is that sit down moment again where you look at how you're going to get there and what can stand in your way, and you're prepared to be able to succeed when you have a plan. Not, if you're just bumbling along and thinking it's all going to be all quite smooth on the road, then you would never advise your students to do that. And you have to take that approach in business as well. It's looking at the risks, looking at the opportunities, looking at how you are able to meet those and how you are going to achieve your goals as well. So, it's having a business plan as well as a solid budget and financial planning for your business is building resilience. And it is the resilient businesses that will fare better coming out of COVID into a recessionary environment than those who have just trundled along. People might have joined a sector because vocationally they were very focused on the training and the love of training. But it's pretty naive to think that's all you do. You do run a small business, and a lot of the risks that you have are in that business side, not necessarily in the on-road side and the pupil side of things. And I can see the bewildered look sometimes on ADIs when I'm in, interviews under caution with the DVSA, or, we're dealing with a tribunal issue or a CCJ, that they didn't think this was the risk that could threaten their entire ADI license and career. And some of the reasons they've got there is bad business management. It's not necessarily their teaching. It's bad financial management. It's not recognizing the risk. So, we've got to sober up to the idea that this is a small business sector. So therefore, a business-like approach to managing the business is absolutely necessary. So if we look at a business plan, it can't just be, it's got to be something that's simple enough for you to write and common sense. And it's got to be something that is workable and usable enough that you will take it out regularly, update it and monitor it as well. You can see textbook examples of what should be in a business plan. And I'll put that slide up now. If you Google what should go in a business plan, you will get this very prescriptive approach that says you should have an executive summary, a market analysis, competitor analysis, a marketing and sales strategy, organizational management chart for the larger businesses, employee staff, a financial analysis. In reality, no one reads these kind of massively overwritten plans. I certainly don't write them anymore. I don't think I've written one since I was a graduate of that scale. A 2-pager will do, as long as it is a map of where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and shows to you that you've thought about all the barriers that could be in your way, but also all the opportunities that could help you get a leg up to that target quicker than most. Do you want to comment on this, Mark? Because you must see businesses, particularly, either in one camp where they're floundering, they don't know how to write a business plan, or they've got such a complex business plan that it doesn't really tell you anything, and it certainly doesn't help them do what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? In a former life, I used to be a bank manager, and I am telling you right now that the business plan that you've got on the slide right there is generally what would come across our desks. Well, from a bank manager's point of view, what we do is we'd flick through it, stick it in a drawer, and probably it would come back out in about 3 years' time with coffee stains on it. That's how good those business plans were, because apart from the financial side of things, didn't really tell us an awful lot about the business. Every single business plan should be unique to you. There's no right way and there's no wrong way of doing it, but it should have some key elements in it, okay? I actually call them, when I actually go through my clients, I actually call them brand Bibles now, because, I realize that small business is really tough, can be tough. And if you've got written down your brand Bible, you go back to it to remind yourself of what you're doing, of why you're doing this business in the first place and what it's all about. So one of the first things where it says executive summary there, do you know what? Write down a couple of things that make you different. All right. And I mean, different, properly different. Don't use buzzwords. Don't use fluffy words. Actually write down what means something to you. Then you're starting to have a look at that market analysis. Now, for all those people out there that have probably read a coaching book or a business book somewhere, you'll probably find that it says SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Yes, still do that, but do it so that it's right. And I'm going to give you a massive tip here, okay? And I've actually, on stage, I've used this story many times. And if I tell you this story, you're probably bound to understand it. One of the biggest things that I noticed in the driving instructor industry is that everybody was, we're going to go on to pricing. I appreciate this, but we're always worried to put up our prices because we always assumed we knew what somebody else was charging. And actually, this story I saw so many times is that if in every test center across the country, there's probably a driving instructor called Bob. We're going to call him Bob. He's been doing the gig for about 20 years. And so you're in the test center, your pupils go out on test, and you turn around to Bob and go, "How are you, Bob?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm brilliant. Great stuff. You're busy?" "Oh, mate, I'm absolutely rammed till the end of October." "Really? That's fantastic. Good on you. Well done. How much are you charging?" "Oh, I'm charging 25 quid an hour." "Oh, top job. Oh, that's top whack. Brilliant. Yeah, rushed off me feet. Can't cope with any more pupils." Brilliant. Then your pupil comes back and happy days, they've passed. But as you're driving home, you suddenly remember that actually you've been teaching a turn in the road to your pupil who's just passed their test in Bob's road. And guess what? Bob's car's always on the drive when you've been doing this driving lesson. So what you do is you go home and you get your partner or you get your friend to ring Bob up and pretend that he's got a 17-year-old daughter or a 17-year-old son. And guess what happens? It's really easy for Bob to fit you in next week, any day, at any time. And then when you ask them the price, they'll go, "Oh, yeah, well, I'll do it at £20 an hour. And if you actually buy 10 hours, it's 190 quid. Never assume. Websites are probably sometimes some of the biggest liars. They'll say that it's £25 an hour, but actually, if you contact the individual, even some of the big boys, guess what? The price isn't what it always seems to be. So you actually have to do your market analysis, your competition analysis, a lot more in depth than perhaps you ever have been. But you also need to have the mindset of where you need to be. So, i.e., do you want to be a cheap and cheerful driving instructor? If you want to undervalue yourself, you carry on. There is room for you. Don't worry about it. Aldi and Lidl seem to do a very good job of discounting. That's fine. But if you are a driving instructor that wants to earn top whack for the job that they're doing, those are the people that you have to go and start researching, because you may actually be worried over nothing, because the guy that tells you he's charging £25 an hour is actually only charging 21. So by you putting your price up to 26, 27, guess what? It's not going to affect you. It's not going to affect him. So just do it. When it comes to your marketing and your sales strategy, who is your ideal pupil? Now, before anybody wisely says anybody 17 and has got all their faculties and wants to learn to drive, don't do it. You should at least have 4 ideal clients, and they should all have names so that you can actually relate to them. Because when you're doing your marketing, your sales strategy, you actually need to understand what floats their boat. Why do they want to pass their driving test? Where do they hang out? And that really matters for your marketing. If all you're doing is you're marketing on Facebook, you're likely to get a lot of tire kickers. Appreciate that. But if you are in the fleet aspect of things, advertising fleet work on Facebook is an absolute no-no. It's utterly pointless. You need to be connecting with people on LinkedIn. Yeah, things like that, so that you understand where you are going to spend your marketing time and money to get your ideal customer and your ideal client. Okay.
And it's more important than ever to think about what we marketeers call the segmentation exercise, which basically means cutting your customer base like a cake into segments, and they're all different. So realizing that customers all have different ways of interacting, different needs, different wants, should be a baseline for any business in normal times. in the post-COVID world, well, it's not going to be post-COVID because COVID will be around for a long time, unfortunately, but in the post-lockdown world, when we go back to work again, there will be a lesser available amount of your traditional segment because they may be nervous about coming back to driving lessons, may not be able to afford it. Their parents might not want them to be exposed to it. And also on the fleet side, there may be less of the smaller types of company you were used to before, or larger people doing fleet training of the nature they did before. So, look at all your segments of customer and see how their changes have, their needs have changed, and what are going to be their barriers to buying from you, and how you can overcome them for them. And communicate the things that you think that they want reassurance on. But also you need to think about new and emerging segments that might not actually have been your traditional pupil base before. And we'll go on to that in a moment. There is going to be a tranche of pupil that is in need of driving lessons that never drove before, and they need to now, and they're not your traditional 17-year-olds.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. And then sort of like going on to organisation and management. Look, if you've got a raft of driving instructors that work for you, great. They go in that business plan as well, because they're all going to have, and it's something I suggested to another instructor who went ahead and did it on his website. Each person is an individual. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. So write them down, because obviously that relates to individual customers to help them succeed as well. But if you're just a sole driving instructor, don't think that actually you're the only person in the business. You're not. I call them a success team. You are the sum of the 5 people that you are surrounded by. If you have successful people around you, you will be a success. So start noting down, like, who is your website designer? Who does your marketing for you? Who's your accountant? Who's your bank manager? Because in these uncertain times, you're going to need to lean on those people, and they should be part of your business plan. For you to actually achieve your goals or achieve your targets, you're going to need them as much as they're going to need you. And then finally, when it comes onto your financial analysis, great. Let's have a financial goal, or let's put it in a different context. If the finances scare you, why don't we do it in a pupil goal? So actually, if you're going to say you're going to earn yourself £30,000 this year, which means that I have to get 60 pupils through the books throughout the entire year, passing their test at X amount, that's great stuff. But why don't you actually say, do you know what? I'd really like to go for 70 pupils this year. And then actually the finances take care of themselves. So there is no right, there is no wrong way of doing a business plan, but it must mean something to you. Your plan is effectively a set of stepping stones to get you to your desired goal and your desired outcome.
Yeah, and I think, a 2-sider or a 1-sider, I tend to use Excel for my business plans. And what I will have is a very simple way of doing it is kind of a what, when, who, where. And I have a traffic light system, which I'm sure the staff at DIA absolutely love, where if we're about to launch something, initiative or a product, it will have a deadline on it, and there will be a constant update of whether we're red, amber and green. And it allows all of us to be sober to the fact that if we're falling behind on something, we will want to know, why are we falling behind? And it's about who's responsible as well, and what are we going to achieve. And why you sometimes revisit your business plan as well is to take things out of there that just aren't relevant anymore. Because if they're in there and you're looking at it and you're not going to do them, and they're not going to have a benefit to your business, they just become a distraction, because it comes with things to do that worries you that you haven't done it, but it might not be relevant to do anymore. So you need to regularly revisit that. On organisation and management as well, if you are running a franchise, it is about that quality assurance of those individuals, because hiring people in any form, employed, franchise or whatever, and letting them carry your brand has a huge amount of risk in it. So making sure your people are on brand, are on policy, are following your procedures, and are the best representation of your brand is really, really important, because one person can let the whole brand down. And we know that to some degree that variety is a problem for DVSA, for example. They will have brilliant examiners, really, nice guys who will give you lots of information and will take the time to really spend some time with you, and they are an absolute credit to the DVSA brand. But then you've got the person who is almost seeking to undermine that and ADIs and their pupils, and they don't want to cooperate. They're not a nice person. They've got no interpersonal skills, and they really bring the brand down. You, as the organizational kind of head, should be controlling that brand. You need to deal with those rogue elements because they are impacting your brand. If they're not doing what they should be doing, you need to be on that person, because they are, the risk in your strategy that can undermine you reaching your goal as well. So if you're a sole trader, as Mark says, who is the team that you need outside yourself to deliver what you need to deliver? Who can you look to if you don't feel like you've got a team at the moment? So, for example, there's many ADI members out there who feel that they're part of the DIA team. They ring us so often, they see us so often, they have so much support from the trading team or from other people. We are an addition to their team. That is our role. We have no problem with that. We can help with marketing advice, business advice, trading advice. So surround yourself with people that you can tap into, and don't be afraid to ring us up and say, I want some help with a business plan, or I've written a business plan. Would you mind having a look at it and seeing if there's something you can help us with? We get an awful lot of calls about help me prepare for my standards check, but not an awful lot of calls about helping me prepare my business to succeed. And that's just as critical in many ways. So if we move on to the marketing, I'm actually going to tab forward for a moment, Mark. I'm going to, the marketing mix is fundamentally the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And that looks at, what is the product that you're selling? Is it clear? Can people grab the concept of what you actually do? Do they know how they would consume it? Why is it relevant to them? Why is it attractive to them? It's place. Where do you actually promote it? Where can people buy it? How easily is it for them to consume? Are you readily accessible to your customer base? And where are you being seen for that customer to find you? And it's promotion. It's actually, how do you promote your goods? How do you advertise? How do you market? But Mark will go through that in a bit more detail later. But there's also many a good video that explains what the 4 Ps are online and on YouTube. What I want to focus on, and why I've introduced the 4 Ps here, is out of these 4 Ps, one of the most important things at the moment is going to be pricing. And I can see some discussion now in the chat about the fact that, if we followed inflation, Mark, good point there, people would be charging well over 35 to even £40 an hour now. And if you compare yourself to other forms of professional trainer, the average in the driving instruction industry is quite low. But this debate has been raging for a long time. Certainly Mark will remember it from his time in the industry.
Yeah.
And, if you have hesitated all these years to put your prices up, then, it's going to become an even more relevant point, because what you charge is going to need to change now to recover the level of income that you would have been at last year, or were trying to get to last year. Your plans to be, at a certain level of income have been severely knocked back. So if your plan last year was to do better this year, obviously you're going to need to figure out how you're going to recoup all of that plan and the setback of COVID-19, but also how you charge is going to have to change as well. So this living hand-to-mouth existence that some people still operate on is going to have to change. If nothing else, this situation we're in at the moment should sober you up to the fact that just charging per lesson, getting cash in, or getting the lesson sent to you by backs, but just for that lesson, is leaving a huge amount of risk for you in terms of income. So what do you want to say about price, Mark? Because I know you've always been very passionate on this subject.
Yeah, it's always been the bane of my ADI life, really. Again, I refer back to the story that I briefly told you earlier about everybody assumes that everybody knows what they're charging. They don't, and there's also I know it's going to sound like a perhaps I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but I'm sometimes really shocked by the amount of ADIs that used to turn around and say, yeah, do you know what? I'm charging £25 an hour. Well, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, they give discounts for 10 hours, which means that actually they're only charging £22 an hour and not £25 an hour. But they're telling themselves they charge £25 an hour. And then when they get to the end of the year, they sort of they put their tax return in. It was always, perhaps to my amusement and my frustration, the amount of people that said I could have earned more money stacking shelves in Tesco's. Well, here's the thing. Whose fault is that? Theirs. It's not anybody else's. So when it comes to pricing, there are some really simple things that you need to remember. Number one is you are a business. You are not a charity. Stop thinking you're a charity. You are a problem solver. Every single business that was ever created is a problem solver. You solve the problem of teaching someone to drive safely and get their driving license. That is the problem that you solve. But I need you to also then consider this. Those people that you are teaching to drive today, tomorrow, next week, next month, whenever, are the future doctors, are the future bank managers, are the future entrepreneurs, are the future frontline heroes. They are nurses. They are going to get a job because they can drive. They don't even have to have driving as their job. Unfortunately, the world, well, fortunately, I suppose, in a way, the world has changed over the last 40 years where people tend not to work in the same town they live in. There are certainly some of the jobs where you start looking at an average wage of around about £40,000 and above. You are required to drive some distance. Yes, it may have changed because of COVID, but there's going to be a balance. You offer a service which allows that individual to earn £40,000 plus a year if they want to. And yet, some people, perhaps on this call, are still charging the same price that I was charging 5 years ago. That is madness. That is utter madness because people are frightened to put their price up. Don't be frightened to put your price up. Treat your existing customers fairly. And if you do have to put the price up for them, they will respect that if you're open and honest about it. Your new customers should officially go on to new pricing. Here's the thing, and it was a bugbear of mine. And I just want you to imagine this conversation. Little Joe has just gone and passed his driving test with you. He's very, very happy. And so he goes and puts his mate Sam in touch with you. And Sam rings you up and says, I'd like to book driving lessons with you because Joe's just passed his driving test. Really happy. Thanks very much. When can you fit me in? And you go and fit him in. And normally the phone goes down. When was price ever mentioned? 9 times out of 10, when you get recommendations and you get pupils through those recommendations, price is never mentioned. Not until the end of your first lesson, normally. And then if you put your price up by £1, guess what? No harm, no foul. It's new pricing, new customer, end of. It's as simple as that. It's one of the easiest things to do because actually the pupil that has passed has done all the selling for you. It doesn't need to happen. If you're then still concerned about your pricing, start thinking about how much value you can put in to your costs. I'll give you a really good example. There is a driving school that I am very well aware of that charges roughly £33 an hour. Okay, which is great. And some of you are going, wow, I'd love to get that. And that's fine. But they do the driving lesson probably in exactly the same way as some of you guys do. But once a week, they do an online webinar where they take people through their theory test. They take them through the really difficult aspects of the theory test. So at any one time, he's got roughly 10 to 15 pupils on that Zoom call, and he's going through a subject of the week, which is helping them pass their theory test. How much does Zoom cost? Zoom costs around about £15 a month if you want to get the recorded version. It's not a lot. Per pupil, that would probably work out at less than £1 each. So if you're going to start looking at cost, it's going to cost you less than £1 each. But it's the added value.
Yeah, we've been saying that for a while. That there's tons of articles in Driving Magazine. There's been articles on here. We've done webinars about it. That adding value is really important at any time, anyway, for retention of the current customer base that you've got. And adding value, like Mark's just said there, will increase referrals because people will talk about, and it will generate that most powerful thing of all, word of mouth. When people are talking about the fact that their driving instructor just does one thing and the other guy says, really, is that all you get? My driving instructor is doing a weekly webinar with me. They send me updates. They send me fact sheets, checklists. They've really helped me prepare for my driving life, not just through the test and afterwards. That's beautiful, because that's marketing you haven't had to pay for other than putting in a bit of extra effort with your pupils. It will also contribute to the quality of what you do, the quality of your output, your pupils' safety and their competency to drive. More learning built around them out of the car is just as valuable as what happens on the road as well. So that value add piece is important in customer retention and differentiation, as in you being different to the rest, but it also will really help, as Mark says, when you want to put that price up, because you'll have a reason for it. It's the elevator pitch. Why are you so much more than the guy down the road? Because I do this, this, and this. It's not just because my pass rate, because the consumer is getting wise to that one. So if you are adding something better, you can charge a better price.
And here's the thing is, if the customer doesn't want to actually, if the customer says, oh, you're too expensive, again, there's another mindset thing that kicks in here, is number one, that's fine, because actually they probably aren't the customer that you want. And number two is, it's not going to be the end of the world. The amount of people that discount because they think that if you say no, because they've rejected you on price, that's it, their business is going to fold. No, it won't. No, it won't at all. In fact, it would probably interest you to know that some of the instructors that I've been working with, actually, those instructors actually charge more locally than a majority of other instructors, and yet still have waiting lists.
Yeah. I'm just reading some of the comments here that, some people are, look, I absolutely recognize that to some of you, it might sound madness to, at this time, be encouraging you to up your prices, because you're citing factors like fuel prices have gone down. So naturally, your customers will expect it to have gone down. That is why everybody running a business everywhere needs to be able to craft their what we call the elevator pitch. You need to be able to put your points forward very succinctly as to why you charge. You need to have an answer. You need to think about, as Mark said before, you need to think about your customer and their wants and needs. You need to think about the questions you're going to get from customers. And that's how you hone your elevator pitch. So think about the fact that you put your prices up, somebody rings you and they say, well, that sounds a bit harsh. I mean, your costs have gone down, right? Because, fuel prices are their lowest ever. When we take you on to the cost factors of running an ADI business slide in a moment, fuel is one factor, and you need to be communicating that to your public as well, and to the public at large. Every ADI on the ground who makes the best sales pitch of why the profession exists, what it does, what the quality of that is, and why it charges what it does, will help the whole profession look and be perceived as more valuable than it perhaps is at this time or ever has been. So that work on the ground to sell to the customers why you charge what you charge, and to tackle questions head on about, well, fuel's gone down. Well, you need to point out it's not my only cost. And my fuel consumption is much higher than most people's. So even if it's at lower cost, it's still a cost to my business. But now I've also got PPE. Now I've also got the fact that I have to have more protocols in my day. I have less time in a way to teach because I'm wiping my bloody car down all the time and things like that. You have to be on these questions and already have the answers, rather than using the possibility of the questions as an excuse not to do something. And if you look at the successful brands, they've already thought of the question they're going to get. They've already thought of the pushback, and they've got an answer for that. In fact, it's in their marketing already. They've already thought what you're going to ask them, and they've overcome it in some way.
Absolutely, and I'm reading those comments in the chats as well, and there's some really enlightened instructors here. I really appreciate it. But you've also got, and there was a little question that I just want to sort of like just put a dot on, really. Is it the right time to be charging more? The answer is going to be yes, because actually there are things that are going on even currently as we speak that means people are paying more for what they would usually get. Now, every single person here has probably gone to a supermarket or has had a supermarket delivery over the last 8 weeks. Would it interest you to know that on average, we are all spending more money on food? Not necessarily because we're locked down, It's actually affecting perhaps some of the poorer demographic, the ones on lower incomes. But if you go into any supermarket or any supermarket website right about now, at the gondola ends, you used to be able to get, like, 3 bags of Wotsits for the price of 2, or two 2 bottles of Coke for the price of 1, or whatever. Actually, a majority of the supermarkets have stopped doing those deals. So actually, for people to get 3 packs of Wotsits, they're now paying more. To get for 2 bottles of Coke, people are paying more. And yeah, food is expensive. You're absolutely right, Felicity. It is. It's out there. So if you're going to do it, and I strongly recommend that you can look at your pricing structure and put it up. Have a look at the comments. There's some really good ideas in there. Look at the way you're even taking the payments. Are you using PayPal? Are there other merchants out there that can actually take that money for you and at a reduced cost, because they take something like 3.5% or something like that? Is there a cheaper way of taking that money? It's all money in your back pocket. But right at the moment, if you're going to do it, now is the time to do it, because to be quite honest, it's going to be justified.
Yeah, and just make sure that you've got the argument for why you're doing it. Don't just put it out there and expect somebody to pay it. It's got to be obviously marketed, and some people might just pay it. But what's also noticeable in the difference in how we're shopping at the moment is you think that actually people are buying the cheapest thing because they're so financially strapped. In some areas, there's been a flight to quality, because people are saying, do you know what? I'm locked down. I'm going to treat myself. Or I'm not going to keep stimping on this. It's kind of, I need something to distract me and keep me going. It should always have been in our, that's a frivolous thing, like a bottle of wine. It should always be in our sector that there's a flight to quality anyway. The kind of arguments with people is because I'm a better instructor, because I get my pupils through in a way that makes them safer drivers. I'm not if you want to go to the 10 lessons for £10 because you think that's how long it's going to take you to drive, go to those guys. But in 6 months' time, when over 50% of, kind of young people in particular are likely to have an accident, I bet you my pupils don't figure largely in that demographic, because what I provide is a quality, safe experience to make you a safer driver at the end of it. And it's kind of those kind of sales pitches that we need to be getting on websites and in our conversation with mums like me on the phone who are asking, why should I choose you? Why should I pay this price? And if everybody was sending those messages out there, the value perception of the profession as a whole would be a lot higher than it is.
Absolutely. And when it comes to pricing, be a leader, not a follower. Be a leader, because believe it or not, you put your prices up, guarantee you those around you will do the same.
And to if you're nervous about it, let the facts draw you in that direction, because I'm not convinced that people, in some respects, at the cheaper end of the market, well, I know that they're not, because we've run the figures ourselves. If you sat down, as you should do in your financial calculations we've asked you to do right now, one of which is to see where you need to recover to. What were you year to date last year? What are you year to date this year? That'll tell you where you need to recover to. You also need to do that sobering look at all of your costs. 1, to see where you can trim them down. 2, to see where you're going to have new costs that you need to factor into financial planning going forward. And 3, just to make sure you're taking account of everything that is a cost to your business that you should do. Because especially if you don't use a business account or a separate bank account, and you've got personal money going out as well as income coming in, it's having a real kind of idea of what it costs to service each pupil. What is each pupil worth to you? And if you don't know the cost of running your business, or you're not including them all in your calculations, you can't possibly know that, so you can't possibly price effectively. So if you don't know how much it costs you to acquire a pupil and to train the pupil and to get them to an outcome, it's very hard for you to calculate what your pricing should be to make a profit. And certainly, all the costs need to be assimilated. So your cost could be things like your car, whether you've bought it or leased it. And obviously depreciation costs need to be factored into that as well. Fuel, you've got to allow for fluctuations in the pricing of things like fuel, because they're really going to affect your costs after the year. So that's why I say, look at what people are saying about fuel costs. It's quite easy to Google and see what the forecasts are going to be around petrol pricing. Motoring magazines run a feature every couple of weeks on something like fuel pricing. Servicing, maintenance and cleaning, those are all costs to your business. Road tax where applicable. Insurance. Now, insurance is a cost that's going to go up. Insurance is going to get scarcer because insurers are going to close some of their books that just aren't profitable, but also have a lot of risk in them. So you're going to see some insurers pulling out of markets. So we had that a couple of years ago. I think Liverpool Victoria pulled out of the trading car insurance market. And that was a bit of a shame in one way because they were actually quite a good provider, but they also provided to insurers over a certain age. And they, as an insurer, even in those times that were better than now, looked at their risk exposure and their cost exposure set against their income and just thought, not worth it. I'm not going to insure in that market. So, as there are less people insuring, the premiums might start going up as well. So I've got to consider that one of your biggest costs is insurance. That might go up in these times as well. You've got interest on loans, for example, that people might be not factoring in, or depreciation might not be factored into your cost necessarily to your business. Telephone charges and admin fees, so your mobile phone bills. It might be you use your mobile for your personal and for your business, so you're not truly reflecting the cost of your usage for business in your costs. Any accountancy fees, any marketing costs, any professional business related subscriptions, your ADI license and your DBS checks, those all need to be priced in. Your pension contributions if you make one. The fact that you may or may not make income protection payments at the moment, or life insurance payments, those kind of costs. There's, some people also allow additional income for holiday or short-term sickness. You have to add on your fixed profit percentage. You may find it easier to work these costs out on a monthly basis than divide it by the amount of hours you spend teaching. You also may want to look at the cost per pupil, cost to service, cost to acquire. Therefore, what do you have to charge per pupil to, as Mark said before, know how many pupils you have to do each year. And once you have that figure, this really, I should have updated this. This is what we were saying a couple of years ago. I think that's changed now. I think if you really calculate all those costs, you should be near £35 an hour.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And there's somebody's just gone and put this in the chat as well, and it's absolutely spot on. Robert, well done. He said even an extra £1 an hour over a year would make a difference to anyone. Well, do you know how much I worked it out to be? Based on a normal ADI's working week, it would be the equivalent of an extra £1,500 a year.
Yeah.
£1,500 a year. Imagine that in your bank account rather than somebody else's.
And Stephen made a point, it's a shame we're not in a world where it's a fixed or standard rate, i.e. it's a regulated industry. I think there's a difficulty with that. Regulated prices means regulated industries. And I know you will argue that you're a regulated industry already, but I also work with financial services, and with that comes more costs, and sometimes it makes it very difficult for independent businesses to have maneuverability. So some people don't like a fixed model because it doesn't also give them the opportunity to differentiate and charge more, or it's harder for them to differentiate and charge more because there's a baseline expectation of what it should cost. But this is the difficulty, and I think if we could get a groundswell of more people valuing what they do and charging more, that would be helpful in building the customer's price expectation as well. Whilst you've got the guy going around offering less than so cheap, that undermines what everybody does. But equally, if people are making much stronger arguments and marketing more effectively why they charge more, that will actually help reposition those cheaper guys. What some of those cheaper guys have been good at, quite frankly, is better marketing than a lot of other people. They've got their brand out there, they've got their pricing out there in front of the customer, ergo they've set that expectation of price. If others pick up their game and market why they exist, what they do, why that's different, and why they charge more, you can reposition the cheap stuff as pat. We know that with our buying decisions about certain products of our own. There is the very cheap thing, but then there is the quality item that if it's clearly communicated why it's different, why it's better, and why it's more quality, we will at the end of the day as consumers often say, do you know what? It's a little bit more expensive, but longer term, it's going to be of more value to me. It'll last longer. It'll be more satisfying to consume than the very cheap thing. And that's the art of those two brands. Is one is, yes, it's playing to the kind of bottom feeding, cheapest, pile it up, pile it high merchant, but actually you can switch a customer to a better quality product and a higher purchase if you get the marketing right as well. And you're explaining clearly why should people pay more. That's the question that you need to ask and have an answer for. So the things that we've talked about, the cost factors, you know, you also have to factor in the fact that there will be new costs such as PPE that have to be accounted for. So as I said before, look at the average pricing of the PPE that you're going to use. So, you know, how many masks do you think you're going to use in a day per how many pupils? How much antibacterial stuff are you going to have to invest in? You know, how does that average out over a month? How does that add to your costs on a monthly basis? And, you know, working out, well, can I buy these things in volume? Is it better to stockpile and have them in volume, reduce those costs slightly? That's that consciousness of cost and how that relates to income and how it eats into income is something that I think will really make people more cognizant of the benefits of putting up your prices, because it's not just about covering those costs, which some people are only just doing. They're only covering costs. They're not making income. It's getting you to a point where you can recover to a level of profitability to be able to stabilize your business and your personal life as well in terms of the bills you've got to pay there. So I think, you know, looking at the whole cost side of things really will make us more aware of what we essentially need to charge. As we said before, it's valuing yourself, your business, and the profession. You know, if you're valuing yourself, the public will value it more. A small increase, as Mark said before, results in a bigger gain at the end of the year. Knowing your worth and knowing how to sell it is really important. It's not just for some, I mean, pre-COVID, we talked about making these increases in terms of your charging, not just to net you more income, but also to net you more time back in your life. You know, not running around doing hours and hours and hours and not seeing your family or not doing the things you want to do because you've got to make a certain level of income. A small adjustment in charging can net you back that valuable and precious commodity of time as well. So if we look at this slide here, sorry, it's just the way that it's done it's overlaid some text here. It's a different view to what we used to set it up, but I'll walk you through it. The analogy we did based on an older calculation now than we probably would do now. If your current price is £24 per hour and you work 40 hours a week, your weekly income is around £960. Don't think about cost per moment, just think about pure income. If you increase your price only to £28 a year, you only work per hour, you only worked 35 hours a week, your weekly income would be £980. Yes, it's only £20 more per week, but you've worked 5 hours less and spent more time with your family or working on things that actually are back in your business in terms of, you know, some diversification or a new marketing plan and things like that. You are getting back some value in your life that you didn't have before, undervaluing yourself. Is something you want to say on that one, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's been a consistent problem, you know, since my days in the industry. You know, I'm still shocked by, you know, I'm being honest about it, and you know, I've been reading some of the chats in there where people have diversified and things like that. There's also something else to consider as well. I'm just going to throw this out there. The instructors on here that run small franchises, so then maybe you may have 2 or 3 instructors and things like that. I keep tripping over those entrepreneurial instructors who are running a bigger school. And they're charging the same amount of money as the instructors that work with them. I find that bemusing. You are the boss. You are the owner of your brand. 6 years ago, when I had my, you know, sort of like my multi-car driving school, I was charging more than everybody else. The reason being, it's my business. I'm the boss. If you want the boss, you're going to pay for it. It's as simple as that, because you have built this business. There is something that you are doing right that means that other people are joining you, and all these pupils are flocking to you left, right, and center because they want to be part of that driving school. So just remember that when you're looking at pricing like this, you know, yes, £4 an hour, you know, if you've got all your instructors charging £28 an hour right now, I would suggest that you yourself are charging 30 to 35, simply because you're the boss. And I know that sounds daft, but it pays you. It pays you for all the hard work that you've put into building that franchise in the first place.
If you go to any other professional areas as well, there is a scale of charges built on seniority and experience. So even in the hairdressing world, there will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the best example.
Blunt scissors, and has only just stopped washing hair, so she doesn't have the experience and the qualifications on the ground. Up to the star director who is obviously going to do a much better job through experience, more training, all of those kind of things. So you pay a bigger price for those people. And that happens with legal services and other things as well. There are fixed price models, but with those fixed price models, bear in mind, you're getting the least servicing. People will pay more for quality. So making sure that, you're clear with people that your level of experience is what, and I think somebody put earlier that, each year they develop what they do. They invest in CPD, they become a better trainer. So each year their prices go up. They value themselves at a better rate. Somebody just made a point, Martin, about less lessons being possible each day, less pupils. And a single cancellation having a big proportional effect. Absolutely, you're going to have to look at your T&Cs and look at how you hedge that risk around pupils cancelling and what your cancellation policy is for those pupils. But another argument of less pupils around is that your pricing does have to reflect that, you might not be able to do as many pupils as you would have done previously because of a lack of demand, or because you make a decision that you're going to do less pupils a day to cut your exposure, particularly during where COVID-19 is still prevalent in our community. So I think, these are arguments to increase your price rather than arguments to think about, panicking and thinking we're going to go into a market that's very competitive. Going into a competitive market means I have to be the cheapest. That is a race to the bottom and is not going to be a successful long-term strategy for a business. Just being the cheapest, your costs are you'd have to be really, really hot on trimming your costs for that to be a successful model. I mean, Mark mentioned Aldi and Lidl before. The reason that is a successful chain is because they can buy in such volume that their costs are so much lower, and they're buying different products to those that Tesco and Asda are chasing, and they're buying as a European buying group rather than a UK based buying group. So they can operate that discounting model because their costs are negotiated so keenly. But on average, a lot of the people who are the cheaper end of the market have got the same cost, aren't necessarily bright enough to be negotiating those costs down. They're making so little money that it's just not a business model that anybody should be following at all. And I just would urge people, it's very easy for us to sit here and say it, I'd urge people not to be panicked into undercutting and undervaluing themselves in this marketplace.
You see, right, it's really interesting that you've brought up Aldi and Lidl. I did a video on this about 18 months ago, and it's the most highly watched video that I've done. Actually, if you look at Aldi, they are marketing geniuses. They really are. If you go past any of their great big billboards and you're driving past and they've got those baskets and it says, the Sainsbury's basket costs £40, our basket costs £30. Brilliant. What they're really smart at doing, and finally the big four supermarkets have suddenly woken up to it, is that actually Aldi were comparing apples and oranges. And by apples and oranges, I mean, if you walk into an Aldi, you can't buy Persil, you can't buy Fairy Liquid, you can't buy Heinz baked beans. But what they were actually doing, and if you actually watch the documentary that was recently on Channel 5 about it, is a lot of their goods are designed to look similar. They are their own brands, but they look similar. So effectively what they were doing is they were comparing their own brand with a big, well-known brand. So people are being drawn to the cheaper price. So it also then shows that actually if you are marketing on value rather than price, you don't get involved in messing about like that. And just another quickie as well. I just saw a comment here. Sean, you say, how would you charge more as a boss without confusing the pricing strategy? Well, there's a couple of things there. You can look at, I know one driving school in particular, the boss charges a little bit more, two of his senior instructors charge a little bit less, and the junior instructors charge even less. They each have their own page on their website, so that if people like the look of them and they like their experience and they like their expertise, they can book via their page. But on the very front page, it actually says driving lessons from. So it's from. So you're not confusing anybody. So, there are lessons available at, say, at £24 an hour. Those may be the junior instructors. But if they want the senior instructor and they really like the cut of your jib, that's it. They go for you and they will pay £30, £35. If you've got a telephone team make sure that they understand it, because therein caused the problem where this boss particularly put up his price, and all of a sudden, that's it. Leads started drying up and he couldn't work out why. Well, actually, I rang his telephone team who were answering his phones for him, and the person on the other end was just flatly saying that every single lesson was 35 quid, which wasn't true. Actually, the bottom end of the lessons were £27, and they were just cutting them off at the neck there. So there are ways around it, but if you use the words from, legally, you are correct, and providing that obviously there are no surprises, and it is clearly stated on your website or any marketing material.
And also, people say, how do you have clearly communicate? If you are going to have a differentiated charging structure, then clearly communicate why that is, exactly as they do in the hairdressing world, or in some legal practices. You will have, kind of whether you're using a partner or an associate or a paralegal is going to be doing the work ultimately. It's clear what the charge out rate is, and it will be differentiated for different people. These are just choices, by the way, people. You don't have to take them. But if it is the fact that you do have a school and that you do have more senior professionals who, you could be differentiated from your trainees or people who've only got a year's experience, that actually might be a marketing model for you, that you can offer people a variety of styles. In the hairdressing world, you had your supercuts, which had fairly flat pricing. You walked in and you took your choices and you took your chances with it being a flat pricing structure, and you got that risk of not being a very good person who hacked your hair to death. Or you make the choice and you go into a salon and they'll give you a menu of people who are going to do it, and it's based on experience. So think about what that means to you and how you price it. As I said, the value add there is the more experienced trainer, and that's why you're charging more for them. It might be that you charge more in a different way because you're adding a different type of value add, not the person, their experience. It might be the experience the pupil's going to get, i.e., every pupil is going to get theory test preparation or a virtual classroom experience or e-learning. That's what needs to come through in your pricing, is how are you adding value. So if we just carry on the pricing side of things, it's not just what you charge and thinking about what is the argument for why you're charging in a certain way and making that clear. People don't have a problem with what you charge as long as you explain very clearly why you're charging it, and why, if you have a scale of charging, there is a scale of charging. And some people have mentioned in the chat there that they make different charging, for example, for doing weekends. We get people saying that they've had no after dark training, for example, or motorway training from their instructor when they've passed their test, and that's where they're nervous. Well, one, that type of training should be going on, and for the pupil's own safety and competency post-test. And two, if you do it, and it is such a burden to do in some respect, accessing things like motorways because you might live a long way, or bypasses, or doing stuff after dark, so it means you have to go out after dark, then you simply charge extra for that service because it's a premium service. So it's thinking about, where you can have your flat charging increased and demonstrate the value of that and why it's more expensive, but also where you can offer premium services to your pupils and charge accordingly for those as well. And that has to be planned into your income and cost for the year. How many of those are you going to have to do to achieve a certain level of income compared to your normal standard charging as well? The other thing we talked to you about today is not just about changing the pricing, it's also about changing the traditional model of people paying you. It does seem that there are people moving to a model where pupils have to book a block of lessons, or they're incentivized to book a block of lessons. That's very sensible, because it gives you a line of sight on your revenue. It locks in revenue. And even if you have to discount that rate slightly to get a block of lessons out of it, that is more valuable because it's locked in and secure revenue than the sporadic hand-to-mouth approach of charging per lesson and no commitment from that pupil that they're going to return for the next lesson, even though you've booked out time for them. And so I think we really need to try and shift the whole industry to making sure that they have a longer term relationship established from the start with the pupil than previously has happened. Mark, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. It's just that obviously when it comes into your financial projections, is that obviously if you are taking these block bookings and you are offering some form of discount, that's your hourly rate. I know it. Again, I apologize if I'm teaching people to suck eggs here, but the amount of people who would tell you that they are charging a particular rate when in fact they're not, and then it becomes stuck in their own head that they're sat there going, well, do you know what? I've got 20 hours this week at £25 an hour, when in fact, actually what they've really got is they've got 20 lessons at £20 an hour. It's very, very different. And obviously by then locking in that those finances as well, it makes it far easier should you do have cancellations, that obviously that money has already been paid for. It's already up front. It's already sat in your bank account. You don't have to go chasing bad debt for it. So no, it's a good strategy, but it comes with caution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to have the right T&Cs in place. You have to have a contract with that customer because you're taking their money up front. So ergo, you've had the money, but they haven't had the product yet. So you need to obviously make sure you're going to deliver that product, or that when you get into problems. You need to have obviously a clear refund policy about that money if they don't feel that your goods have been fit for purpose or you delivered what you said you're going to deliver. So it should be very clear in the contract that you engage in with the customer. What are they going to get? How is that going to be delivered? What are the caveats you're going to put it? What should they expect is reasonable from you? I.e., in this contract, I'm allowed to cancel up to 5 lessons due to sickness or whatever, and that's okay. You can't have your money back from me. But what happens if you really mess the customer about? What is the contractual obligation from you to refund them if they don't feel they've got what they should get out of you? So setting expectation is very important in those kind of relationships. Having a clear contract of what they can expect from you and what you will deliver to them. Having a refund policy, having a complaints procedure, all of that has to come as you lock people in. But your alternative to getting people to pay up front for a block of lessons is to getting them to contract to a number of lessons, but they pay over a staged monthly payment. So you sell them 40 lessons, but they can pay for that over X amount of months. But again, that's going to have a contractual nature to that, so that they make sure that they get what they're contracting to pay. Because if you're going to write a contract, they are going to be duty bound to pay that for the 6 months, regardless of what happens. But there needs to be strong T&Cs around that and a strong contract in place with those. So there isn't there's a few models to lock your income in. It's just weighing up which is the right one for your business, and that you have the right T&Cs in place to be able to deal with that relationship that you're going to with your pupils. But we've all now witnessed what a very uncertain world it is out there in terms of income. That should make us think more so about how to lock income in rather than going lesson to lesson with customers that can just disappear off into the ether at any point. Mark, anything you want to say on that?
No, absolutely right. I've just had kind of a quick look at the questions. Pauline asks, can you advise what would be a reasonable charge for cancelling block bookings if legal? Well, look, you can come up with a number as much as you like. It's not a problem, providing that your T's and C's are watertight and it has been signed for. Yeah, the amount of people that have got some T's and C's, A, they don't enforce them, or B, they're basically copied and pasted from somebody else, which is never a good thing to do because it leaves you wide open. You think you're locking people down to one thing, and in fact, actually, you're doing something completely different. If it's in your T's and C's and you feel it's reasonable and they've signed for it, well, therefore it's reasonable. But it's a bit like the financial services at the moment, is that if you go and buy some insurance or anything like that, you have cooling off periods, you have to be told of the highlights, you have to be told of X, Y, and Z so that people actually understand it. I would say in real life, it is about being reasonable, and it's about having that open and honest conversation at the beginning of any start of tuition. But if you want to sort of like make sure that it's utterly watertight, go to a company that offers that writes T's and C's. They'll talk to you, they'll sit down with you and say, well, what would you like to put in here? Do we think that's reasonable? Providing the customer has signed it and they've agreed it and they've said, yes, I understand it, therefore it's going to, you shouldn't have any blowback on that.
I mean, T&Cs basically, we have T&Cs that we offer to members in the form of a pad, and we're just looking at getting a PDF version available or an amendable version available for people as well. And certainly that we're going to have to get those updated in respect of COVID-19. But T&Cs obviously have to be fair. Now, in the finance industry, one of the core tenets of the Financial Conduct Authority in how you treat a client is that it should be clear, fair, and non-misleading. Now, so I kind of started out my marketing career in financial services, which isn't a bad place to start because you're heavily complied and regulated. So it means you don't take too many risks as a marketer in what you say, what you offer, and what you deliver. And that's really stuck with me throughout my career: clear, fair, and non-misleading. And if you take that approach to your T&Cs and any contractual arrangements that you're going to enter into with your pupils, and actually how you deal with your pupils as a whole, is what you are doing clear? Is it fair to you and the customer? Fair doesn't necessarily mean just the customer. It's got to be fair to the business as well. And is it non-misleading? Do they know what they're getting into, what their risks are, what they're liable to pay, when they're liable to pay it, and what is the process if they feel that this has not been fair and not been clear and that they've been misled, or that you haven't delivered the product that you contracted to as well. So those are the things you need to consider in terms of entering into what we're basically recommending is a more contractual arrangement with pupils than previously ADIs might have entered into. A lack of T&Cs that aren't clear. Well, no, Thomas just asked, can a 17-year-old sign T&Cs legally? No, but you can ask the parent to sign them. And that's worth doing anyway. But
especially as it's normally the parent that's paying.
Yeah, yeah.
Because again, this is that when we talk about ideal customers and ideal clients, we often forget that because actually we think the ideal customer and client is the person sat next to you in the car. Not necessarily. It's actually the parents that tend to pay for that. So you're absolutely right. If they're under 18, get the parents to sign for it because invariably they're the ones that will be ringing up if you're not giving them some money back.
Yeah. And a lack of T&Cs can get you into hot water as much as not having one. We recently had a member who had a CCJ awarded against them because they refused to refund the pupil for lessons not fit for purpose, not delivering lessons frequently, cancelling the lessons, and the ADI had no terms and conditions to cover him for refusing the refund. And for the base minimum of what he was allowed to do in terms of late notice cancellations and things like that. So the CCJ was upheld against the ADI, and the ADI was actually dismissed from the register for unfit and improper conduct. And the reality is, he should have had the T&Cs in place to protect his business, as well as to be seen in the eyes of the court that he was being fair in his treatment of customers. Because I think one of the decisions in that case was the ADI was not acting in a fair business manner with his pupil. But it also, the other mistake that they made was over an amount of what was about £200, their refusal to refund actually led to the loss of their license. So they lost a whole lot more than £200. So it is about what is fair, what is clear and non-misleading, and that you have that clearly set down somewhere and that they've signed up to it and they realise the penalties for them if they don't follow through on it. But yeah, so locking in income is really important. It just needs to be done in the right way. The bit we're going to go into now, we're quite happy to carry on with price questions and locking in income questions and give individual advice to people as we go. Is engaging with your pupils and your customers. They should have been engaged with throughout the crisis. It's not just a case of, well, my business is shut up. What have I got to tell them? Why would I be communicating with them? I've got my own problems. I've got to worry about where my money is coming from. Your pupils are still your customers, and they were left bewildered by as much as you were by the cancelling of tests. And then if their instructor has just suddenly disappeared from their world as well, then don't be surprised if when you want to go back to business, or when you can go back to business, they might not be around anymore because somebody has managed to pick them off who's maybe gone back to work in the last few days and is marketing in a downturn, in a crisis, because they realize actually marketing and communicating at a time like this is a very good thing to do because people are desperate for information, desperate for advice, and they are scanning the media, Facebook, they're scanning their emails. The open and engagement rate of our email campaigns is through the roof at the moment. And so, that's the important thing, that we started off our webinar series almost as soon as driving tests stopped, in fact, maybe even before, was a webinar on continuing to engage with your pupils and how it's important to keep them updated at this time and feeling like they're cared for as a customer. So it was a question of, were those pupils locked in? So are they people that you can go back to now? And do you have to prioritize them in your return to work when you go, because they've already paid you money up front, and balancing them against new customers that you might want to get in. They'll be looking for advice right now from you, because they'll be reading in the media things that could be misleading about when lessons are going to resume. They'll be seeing some instructors on the road and wondering why you're not back on the road. So advice on that, answering any concerns or queries. There's some of you who have been taking advantage of the fact that you're already very switched on about doing virtual learning, and the biggest training boon throughout this whole crisis, and where some platforms have made money rather than lost money because they're digital learning platforms, or they're things like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, is because everybody has been kind of switched on to being online for learning, for information, for advice, for consuming their products. So they're shopping online, they're learning online. So those instructors that were already in that world were able to keep in touch with their pupils, but also educate them throughout this period. So it might be, if you're thinking forward, something like this happening again, or it being quite a long time before you can get back on the road, then how do you keep your pupils engaged? Even if you're just getting in touch with somebody to offer them reassurance that you'll be back to work soon, the other reassurance they're probably looking for is, how are you going back to work? What are you going to do to keep them safe? What are the measures that you will be taking as a trainer? What are your new protocols and procedures as well? So those are the kind of communications pupils and their parental decision makers will need to hear. Parental decision makers are already ringing us and saying things like, my son's instructor's been in touch. I don't know whether I should be doing driving lessons at this time. I don't know whether I should be sending them out there. So if you're not going to go back to work now, it's a good idea to get messages out to your pupils about why you are not doing that, and when you think is a safe time to do that, and what precautions you will take to keep their pupils, their sons and daughters, safe, because that might stop them in their tracks from running after somebody who's already targeting them, telling them to get back on the road with them today rather than wait for you. And brief people on what is going to be the new normal when it comes to driver training. That it's not going to go back to exactly how it was before they finished learning with you. It's going to be a different type of training, and particularly those pupils who were test ready before COVID-19, they obviously need to be briefed properly that they will not just be going back and straight to the test centre. They will need some refresher training, and there might be a longer wait for their test, or even if they can see that date coming through, they're going to have some training. It's not just a case of they just turn up and back we go. So has anybody here been doing that, making sure that they've been keeping their pupils engaged throughout the crisis? Because I have heard that from pupils that haven't heard anything at all since testing stopped from their instructor. So it seems that most people have been keeping in touch every week. I mean, even if you're just saying, hi, no update as yet, but as soon as I hear something, I'll be in touch with you. But here's an article you might want to read in the meantime, or here's a YouTube video. And you were having trouble with roundabouts just before we stopped training. Well, I can't take you on those roundabouts at the moment, but this video might show you a better way of thinking about it. Or, all those kind of things are important in retaining them as a customer, but also giving them reassurance that you're thinking about them, that you care about them. We all want to feel cared about as customers. But the important steps now is, if you haven't done any of that to date, is there, people say, well, what have I got to tell them? I don't know when I'm going back to work. I don't know when this is going to happen. But you do know that when you go back to work right now, it's going to be different. There's going to be protocols you're going to have to put in place that you didn't have before. And there's going to be things the pupils are going to have to do that they didn't do before. So that there is a point of communication for you right now if you haven't communicated previously. Is there anything you want to add on that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually great. It's actually great. A great source of research as well, if I'm totally honest. Look, in my own industry, and I'm going to be completely frank with everybody here, is that on the 23rd of March, pretty much 90% of my business walked out the door, because if you're a business owner, effectively you have a choice of paying an idiot like me or putting a tin of beans on the table. I'm fairly certain I know which way I would have gone, which was the beans, obviously. But I just went into almost what I would call full fight mode, which was a case of, I'm so supportive of small businesses. I'm going to just put as much stuff out there to help people get through this and come out the back end of it, knowing that everything's going to be all right. Their business is still running, all these bits and pieces. And it was really interesting that because I was doing that, because I was keeping in touch with effectively my ideal customers and my ideal clients, is that I was finding out that other coaches had actually dumped some of their clients because they couldn't afford to pay them, which I was utterly appalled by and shocked by. But just by speaking to your current customers, you might be considering that your pupils are going to have a problem with X, or they're going to have a problem with Y. But unless you speak to them, actually, it might be something completely different. They may have an image of them sat there in one of those great big ruddy visors doing their driving test with a pair of rubber gloves on and a plastic Mac. They may have that image. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that may be really worrying them and concerning them. So if just by getting in touch with them, it means they're not forgotten. You value their custom, you value them learning with you. So if you haven't done it, I would suggest as soon as you get off this call today, get on the phone, get in touch with all your pupils, see how they're getting on, even if it's just for a little bit of a chat. It goes to show you care.
Yeah, and I think that the organizations that have communicated, you'll have them in your own life. There will be products and services that you consume, and some will have been really good at communicating during this crisis. Some you will have had to go to them to try and communicate with them, and then not being able to talk to them. And that has left a positioning of that brand in your mind, one way or the other, either good or bad. And I know that, what we've done during this crisis is by no means perfect. We're a little bit like the government. We've tried some stuff. It hasn't worked. We've not managed to do some stuff that people had an expectation we would do. We've all been learning and creeping and crawling in the dark a lot through this crisis. But at the other end of that, we on a much smaller resource of people, we have produced quite a lot of communications, we've produced a lot of webinars, and we've tried to keep people as updated as much as we could. And the only people who ever ring us and say we've done nothing are the ones that when they check their spam filter, they find out that all our emails have been going there as well. But, it has actually gained us some support as well, because they can see that we're, at least if we're not getting it perfect, we're doing our damnedest to get information out to people in a timely manner and communicating. And sometimes, we've sent out a communication that people have just emailed back, no hello, dear DIA, or hi. They've just emailed back, well, that was a load of bloody use, or thanks for nothing. You kind of miss the point in a way when you write that to us. It's not. We're telling you that we care and we want to communicate. And actually, there has been updates in that communication. It's just that we can't give you the answer that you want right now, but we're trying to give you the update of when we think we'll get it, what we think it will be, and what the frustrations are in trying to get that message. That's better, I believe. And I'll put up with all the thanks for nothing, you've told me nothing emails, just for all the people who say thank you. It's just nice to hear from you, DIA. Or I did learn something from that because I read the whole newsletter, rather than just looking for the bit telling me whether I can go out and teach definitively or not. So I think, our experience has been it's better to communicate, and that people feel more valued and they will be loyal to you rather than just kind of leaving them in the dark. And that's when people switch to another supplier or brand. So I can see a lot of chat about going back to work and when can we do that. But I will deal with the kind of questions that I'm getting that aren't necessarily the back to business. I know back to business would be, maybe you expected me to give you that answer as a cast iron guarantee, but I'll deal with those questions towards the end. So we're nearly there now, folks. So engaging your pupils, we've agreed, really, really important. And I'm really, really pleased to see so many of you. I would expect nothing less from those of you who engage with our webinars and are our members or engage with us in other ways. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily what everybody's been doing. And I think, those are the people that will sadly lose customers, because those pupils will move to other trainers when they hear their friends have had far more communication and updates. And also what I just say is, if you're struggling, I sometimes struggle, and it's my job to write and communicate things, but sometimes you need a little pithy paragraph, or you're struggling to put the words in the right way. I have no problem if you think there's something useful in our emails to you on a weekly basis or in the magazine or online. I've no problem if you want to use some of that stuff to copy and paste it. If that is a quick way of you disseminating the latest information about, tests to your pupils rather than you having to write it, I have no problem with that just being forwarded on or copied and pasted out of those emails. Marketing out of a downturn or a crisis, it's something we might actually do as another webinar. Myself and Mark might do a marketing specific webinar that looks at tactics and channels of marketing and vehicles that people could be using. But it goes back to what we said at the beginning, that if you understand your customer universe, you understand there's lots of different types in there, and you can probably, even as much as we all like to think of ourselves as unique individuals, you can always segment a type of customer. And once you recognize a type of customer, you learn a lot more about them. You start to think more like them. As a marketeer, you try and think as a customer first and the marketeer second. You're trying to get into the head of the customer to then find out what they want, they need in terms of communication, product, how it's delivered. And then the marketeer comes in and thinks how you deliver all that. So understand your customers are going to be different and are going to react to this crisis in different ways. Some of your pupils might not want to come back, however much you might be raring to go. You might not see some of your pupils for a while, because we can already see on Facebook that there are a split camp of, for example, parents who are desperate for their children to go back into school. Parents are saying, my kid's not going inside a school building till 2021. So you might have a pupil who doesn't want to go back because they've been, kind of given that fear of what's out there, not wanting to leave that bubble that they're in. Or it might be their parent who is saying, I'm not having my child exposed in any way. It could be a mature learner or an occupational learner who is fearful of the contact with a driving instructor and the exposed situation you're in. So some of your customers might not be around. You might actually see new customers coming to you that you haven't encountered before. So, for example, the reason in our key worker driver trainer register materials, we've actually had a focus on occupational driver training as much as we had safe protocols for COVID-19, is because for the first time, those who are doing key workers are training people in an occupational driving sense. Their book may have mainly been composed of your typical learners before this, but they're finding they're virtually doing almost a kind of fleet training now. So we wanted people to have that knowledge that they were training somebody to go out the door into a role where they would drive for work and what the increased risk was there and how to mitigate it. There is a thought and a prediction that more people will now travel in single vehicles to work, and we'll have an increase of traffic on the road of single vehicles because people are fearful to use public transport. There will be more people commuting for work under their own steam than using public transport. So already, as you've got a tranche of key workers who need to be mobilised, we saw a demand in certain areas for key worker training. We've started to see an increase in trainers being asked by people who aren't necessarily key workers, but they've been told by their bosses to get back to work. And the only way they can get there now is by car or bike, and they've relied on public transport reasons. So they're now asking for lessons as well. And so there's a whole raft of people who are going to drive or ride for work that might either be full license holders, so they want some refresher training because they haven't driven for many years and certainly not in a commuting context, or they're people who are getting driving licenses the first time, at a much older age than the 17-year-olds because they're having to drive for work. So whilst you might see some pupils not back in the market, you might see new pupils back in your market that you might not have seen if it wasn't for this crisis and people's need to perhaps drive under their own steam. So it's working out in your pupil base, who are the low-hanging fruit that are going to come back to learning soonest when you want to go back and actually have the wherewithal financially and the motivation to do so. So those could be those who need to drive for work, those who fear using public transport and want to make the switch, and those less financially damaged by the crisis, and target your marketing strategy and how you prioritize those pupils accordingly. You need to keep them less confident and nervous about returning to driving pupils in mind. You need to keep them communicated to. You need to reassure them of your process and protocols. But if they're not going to come back soonest, you need to prioritize those pupils who are able to come back to you. So, it's in your communications, it's working out where your pupils are in the cycle of coming back to driving. It's not just a case that you rock up on day one and say, I'm back to work now, everybody, let's get those lessons booked in. It could be that, some people don't want those lessons. So it's finding those people are and being able to take advantage in your diary of new people who might come to you that you haven't experienced before, but they're having to drive for work. So maybe reflect that in your marketing as well, that if you're if you're now having to commute to work by yourself, you're not having to drive for work, come and see me about refresher lessons, because a lot of people are nervous about increasing their driving if they've only done known journeys to local destinations for social and domestic purposes, and now they're having to drive to work on motorways. So maybe put yourself out there as somebody who can help people drive for work. Not that we want to encourage tons of traffic back onto the road, but we've got to deal with what's inevitable here. And take advantage of that market as well. Make it clear in your marketing that you're not just here for the traditional 17-year-old learner with a professional license. You can deal with older learners who are learning to drive for the first time for work, and you can deal with people who want to refresh any aspect of their driving if they've not been driving a lot for the last few years. So that's our advice on that. But we'll do something a bit more widespread on marketing out of a downturn. Mark, you've got some thoughts on that as well. I know you've written before about not a downturn, but the periods of time that people think are rubbish for marketing, like Christmas and summer, are actually good times to market because all the other marketeers are thinking it's a bad time to market. So
yes,
not
you
many
went away. The screen went
people.
completely black.
Yeah.
And you disappeared completely, and now you're back. It was just left on my own, just for in a dark room by the looks of it. That's all. But you're back now, so that's good. Thank you. I was worried. I thought I was going to have to start singing a song or something. I think you. So
hopefully, did I disappear for everybody just then?
There you go.
Okay. But anyway, for those who missed what I just said, I literally was just talking about the fact that you might have a very different marketplace going forward in terms of pupil, and you might see some new types of pupil that you haven't seen before. Those people who are going to have to drive for work suddenly coming to you for refresher lessons or new licenses at an older age, because they might have been city dwellers who've previously commuted on public transport that's very good in certain areas, but now they're nervous of doing that and they want to get back on the road. So it could be that you see different types of pupil, but keeping in touch with your other pupils and make sure they feel reassured about coming back.
Can I just add something there as well? And I think it goes back to communication, and it goes back to numbers as well. Okay. Again, I'm going to be bluntly honest. We are heading for one of the biggest recessions this country has ever seen. So you may be in a position where, yes, you may have customers hungry to come back. The only problem is they may not be able to afford it because their own circumstances would have changed. You just have to keep your eyes on the media, where you're actually seeing that the amount of people that signed up for universal credit at the start of this went up something like about 400,000. You've also then got, there was a job loss announcement from Rolls-Royce yesterday of over 9,000. Some of these big companies are going to be offloading a lot of workers. So it goes back to your financials, but it also goes back to your communication with your customers. You're going to have to market yourself out of this quite simply because some of your customers at the moment, as much as they want to come back, they will not be able to come back because they haven't got the money to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, so that there's the customers who might disappear because they can't afford it, don't have the financial wherewithal. There's the customers who don't come back because they're nervous of the teaching context that you unfortunately have to face. So it's giving them some reassurance. With the customers that don't have the financial wherewithal, that's look, if you're committed to that pupil and you want to help them, you make your own decision, your own business about what you do with that. But that's where you may be able to entice some people to come back on that basis if you can offer them that they can book a number of lessons up front so they feel like they're working towards a goal still, but they pay monthly. And again, you'd have to have obviously a strong contract in place for that to happen and protect your risks as well. But with the pupil, what we're suggesting is the pupils that have disappeared could potentially be replaced by the kind of pupils that have to drive now and will have to find the money because it's their only way of getting to work and making sure they're back at work. In some regions, public transport is still not operating at the level it should be, yet they've told people to get back to work if they can't work from home. And that has led to some of our members starting to see an increase in demand for lessons from people who, you know, have never needed to have a driving license before, but now they need to commute to work. So there we go with that. Now, the last bit we're going to do now is about risk-proofing your business. It's just a reminder again that a pandemic of this scale was unprecedented, but your business is sadly at risk at all times from a number of factors. There's road risk, compliance and regulatory risk, economic risk, competitive risk, reputational risk. You know, all of these risks existed before COVID-19, and now we've got this other risk to think about. So all the things that you're going to put in place to mitigate this risk will also be very important in mitigating a lot of your other business risks as well. But if you are now obviously wise to the fact that there are other risks other than, you know, failing your standards check, losing pupils, you know, road risks, those kind of things, and you want to know more about that, we have done a risk management webinar a few weeks ago that looked at the types of risk that are key in a driving instructor business. And we're also designing a risk management course at the moment, which looks at how to mitigate those risks. What things can you put in place to lessen the impact of those risks if they hit your business as well? So it's worth having a look at those webinars and look out for that course coming to you as well. So really, that's it in terms of what we have to say today to you guys. It's just a mixed bag, really, of our thoughts about the kind of things you can be thinking about now, alongside all of the questions about PPE and how would you schedule lessons and all those kind of things. It's the business part is just as important to think about as the training part if you're going to, you know, make your business able to withstand, you know, going back to work
I've
and
actually
the
said
recessionary
this
environment that you're going to go through as well.
The very
Anything
start
to
of
add
it.
to
I
that,
think
Mark?
it's a very strange time. When everybody's saying it's unprecedented, I partly disagree because everything changes. Everything changes. It's just that on this particular occasion, everything's changed for everybody at exactly the same time. Different ways of working, different ways of doing things, different ways of living our life. We're all having to go through that change. But I actually think it's Mother Nature's way of getting us off the treadmill for a change. And actually, so there are many, many businesses that are going to come out of this damn sight better, a damn sight stronger, because they've taken the time to reflect on their own business, refresh what they're doing, rebrand if necessary. And you know what? In a very odd way, you're all being given a golden opportunity, because that very first day that you are back and you are out and about and you are teaching, you've got the opportunity to relaunch your business to the wider public all over again. It's like that very first day that you got your badge, popped through in that envelope, and it came to your house, and you jumped in the car, and you were a fully qualified ADI with your name or your brand above your head as you were driving around. So in a very odd way, you guys have got an amazing opportunity to look at your business, remodel your business, change different things in your business, add to things in your business. And you know what? I think most of the people on this webinar, because I've been reading the questions, I've been reading the chats, you know what? You guys are going to come out so much better, and you are really, truly going to get the business that you deserve.
Yeah, I think, the people that engage, and we've had higher engagement from members and also non-members throughout this crisis, as people have probably realised in some respects the value of joining a professional association, because information has been scant from DVSA and where you'd normally expect to find it. And Facebook has been useful to some, but also has abounded with, misinformation and myths. I think, Mark's very much right that it is an opportunity. It's an unfortunate term, but does get used a lot in business. And sorry if it upsets anybody who had relatives involved in this, but ground zero, obviously we know why ground zero is called ground zero, but it's used in business as a, something catastrophic has happened, or there's been a big change in a business. You've now actually got an opportunity to ground zero something and look at it, understand what the catastrophic incident that in this case is COVID-19 has taught us. What have we learned? And what can we do better when we go back out there again? We've had a period of time to reflect and do things different. I think whole of society will have that approach now. We're all going to change the way that we live our lives in some respects because of COVID-19. And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. But from this point, how do we go forward? And yes, there are difficult waters ahead, but if we prime ourselves now, we're honest about that, we're aware of the challenges, but we have strategies to overcome them, then I think those are the businesses that will do very, very well. And I think it will change the face of driving instruction for the better as well. I think it will change the type of individual who can thrive and the type of business that will thrive. And I think it might not necessarily do the damage that people think it will have done as well. So I wish everybody the best of luck as they go back out there. I'm sorry if people didn't thought this webinar was going to be some big announcement about the date that you can go back. We haven't got that yet, folks. NASP, who I'm part of and who DIA is part of, the National Association of Student Partnership, is broadly saying that we follow DVSA's advice that at the moment it's recommended that training really is restricted towards those who are teaching key workers, just to manage the risk. However, we are conscious of the fact that some people have taken the decision to go back on the road. There is a viewpoint that it's not going to necessarily be that much better in terms of a risk of COVID-19 in 6 months' time as it is tomorrow. So I'm going to have to go back out there sometimes, says some, and they go back out. Others have decided to wait a little bit longer and see that R rate drop a little bit more and feel like they're going to be a bit safer. But I think most people will probably start to look back at work around about mid-June to start of July. I know my co-associations, NJC and MSA, are a little bit more conservative and say the start of July. If tests are starting in July and those dates hold, I would see it that some instructors are going to naturally want to look to go back in mid-June if you're wanting to give your pupils a good 2 to 3 weeks back in the tuition seat before they go to the driving test centre. So say you have pupils that are slotted in already for tests on the 1st of July. I think there's even been some very, very late June appointments given to people. And if it looks like they're going to go ahead, then naturally a trainer is going to want to get on the road with them a week to 2 weeks before that and take them out. And we've had those conversations with DVSA, and they do recognise that if people have got early test dates, it is the right thing to go out with them and get them to test standard again, rather than create the public health risk of presenting a non-test ready pupil just because you think there's this set in stone date of the 4th of July. There is not a set in stone date of the 4th of July. I think that's other associations have given that date out and it's become the truth. The reality is you train and make decisions about your individual business at your own discretion and risk. There is not a piece of legislation or regulation right now that exists that bars anybody going back to work. It is an individual risk that people are taking who've chosen to go back to work now. That is what they have decided as a business. I think, we also support the people who want to stay at home for a little bit longer and take their time. And they will argue that they're being responsible about not spreading risk or, spreading contagion by not encouraging people to come out back onto the road. But it is a balance for people, and I recognise that. And that's why we try and support members across the spectrum rather than sticking on one side only and saying no one should do anything until a certain date. It's going to be down to a client-centered approach and a business-centered approach. You will have pupils who need to go for sooner tests than others, and that is why some will have to go back to work a little bit earlier so they can ensure that pupil has the relevant training. There will be those who won't go back to work for a very long time because they have to shield their family members or they have their own underlying health risks or fears about that health risk. So, there isn't really one solid prescription for exactly what day everybody will go back to work. And I think to hold out that there will be that kind of go date is slightly naive and unrealistic to give out to members. So calls for advice, look out for our advisory publications, but be aware that DVSA will say that that you should be preparing your pupils for test, and it is your decision about when you go back just before that test. They are saying at the moment they recommend that tests, so the training should really only be for key workers. I do agree that we should try and limit the amount of training to limit the amount of risk to a minimum. But at the end of the day, you will make your own choices and at your own discretion. And if the best we can do is give people support and advice about how to do that safely, I'd rather give that support and advice to somebody who wants to go out tomorrow to do it safely, rather than tell them off and tell them they can't do it and then they don't take or hear any of our advice or training whatsoever. So again, I'm not giving you the answer that you want, but hopefully I'm giving you support and guidance. And hopefully overall this period, we've been able to help you during what's been a really trying time. So thank you, everybody. Been a much longer session than we perhaps anticipated, but thanks for all your questions and all your chat. We'll take on board a lot of things that you've been saying. I've had a lot of questions about PPE in this session as well, I can see. So I'll try and remember all of those and filter them into tomorrow's PPE seminar. I'm going to try and cover as much ground on PPE as I can. But bear in mind, I might have to do another one, or Howard might have to do another one at another stage, because advice about PPE is changing. So it's, for example, it's looking likely that we're going to be asked to wear masks in certain circumstances just to go about our daily life. Government guidance is changing on certain things to allow us to be, kind of freer a little bit sooner. So it will try and answer as many of your questions as you've got right now with the advice that we have right now tomorrow. But as we go, we'll also update you through other channels as well. Okay, so thanks everybody for today.
Carly, don't forget
I will speak to those of you on the PPE seminar tomorrow. And those of you...
I'm still here.
Sorry, Mark's going to be... Mark's still here. I want to thank you. Mark is going to work with us on some business-related tools for the DIA Academy, some courses and some more webinars for us. So you'll probably see a bit more of Mark and his business coaching.
Yeah, sure.
But he's also running some sessions. So Mark, do you want to tell people
when you
about
get
these little
given
sessions
opportunities or you get adversity thrown in your face, that actually you come up with something that, believe it or not, you wouldn't ordinarily do, but actually works. So I normally do big masterminds. So that's normally a group of businesses all get in a room. They all talk about their issues, their problems, their concerns, and they all hold each other accountable and make each other successful over a year's period. Well, obviously, with everything closing down, we couldn't do that. But a little idea popped in my head. And over the last 6 weeks, I've been running online mini masterminds. So it's 90 minutes. Over each week for 4 weeks. That's all it is 90 minutes over each week for 4 weeks. It's pretty intense stuff. And what we do is we talk about goal setting. We talk about marketing. We talk about planning. And then we work out a way to stick it all together that works for you. There is no one size fits all, but as a group, we work out what works for you. Now, I am telling you right here, right now, I am utterly shocked at the success these have been. So far, 20 businesses. I've only run 4 groups, and they have a maximum of 5 businesses in each one. But I have had 20 businesses go through them. Every single business, and they have all been affected by the current pandemic, have grown during the last 6 weeks, including 2 which have doubled their income pre-COVID during COVID. And they don't sell toilet rolls and they don't sell face masks or anything like that before anybody asks. But they are ordinary businesses that have gone back to the drawing board. They've taken a look at their business. They've taken a look at their model. They've taken a look at their goals and their plans and how they set it all out. And they've gone on and it has worked. So as you can see on the slide there, I am running 2 ADI specific groups because you guys have been on here. I'm running 2 ADI specific groups. One will start on Wednesday at 10 a.m. The other one will start on Thursday at 10 a.m. And it's just 90 minutes of your time for 4 weeks. And I've done it at a ridiculous price because, quite simply, I also understand that every penny counts. So it is the only financial commitment you have got is £29 per week for 4 weeks. And I am guaranteeing you, and that's one of my favorite phrases that I use, but I am guaranteeing you that it will actually make you a damn sight more money than you are paying me to do this. You'll be on here with your peers, so there'll be some great interaction, some great conversation. You'll be locked into a secret Facebook group where you'll be able to support each other, ask questions. I will be throwing tasks at you that will get your grey matter thinking about your business in a different way. And I guarantee you that when you start teaching again, you're going to come out a much bigger, better, faster, stronger business than you were when you came into this. So that's what I have to offer you as just because I want to help you guys.
Mark, just a point on that one. Apparently, you're giving out different
it should
days
be.
for
My
that.
apologies, because I did this very early this
Tuesday and
morning. So my
Wednesday.
apologies. It is Wednesday and Thursday. So it's Wednesday the 28th, 10 till 11:30, and Thursday. That's where I've gone wrong. It should be Thursday the 28th of May, right? Thursday the 28th of May, 10 till 11:30, and Wednesday the 27th of May. I shouldn't have got that wrong because it's my mum's birthday. She's going to kill me. Wednesday the 27th of May, 10 till 11:30 as well. And this just goes to show that, you know, you really shouldn't do your presentation slides at 6:30 in the morning. That's all I'm saying. Sorry about that, folks.
Mark, if you do me a little bit of a blurb and a write-up about that, because you've given your time freely today and to give us some to start developing some other advisory resources for our members, I'll pop that in a newsletter. So I've got some news. There's a HMRC webinar that they're running that I think is useful for people to hear about as well. So I'm going to pop an email around to members today about some other useful webinars that aren't our own necessarily,
I will get that
but you still might find useful. So I'll pop the details of that in there if you can email me a bit of blurb.
No, thank you for inviting me.
So finally, we're off, guys. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mark, for giving your time today. I think it's been nice for people to hear another voice and one that's done the job that they're doing, but is also, you know, somebody who's really good with marketing and coaching of small businesses as well. And thank you very much for all your comments. I'll speak to some of you tomorrow on the PPE. In the meantime, as we always say, stay safe and stay well, and hope to see you all soon. Take care then. Bye-bye.